He told himself it didn't matter the first time he saw it. A notification, a photo, a life that looked slightly brighter than his own in a way he couldn't quite explain, the kind of brightness that doesn't shout but lingers in your mind long after you've put your phone down. It should have been a normal evening. He had finished work, eaten something quick, and sat down with the quiet intention of resting. Instead, he found himself scrolling without purpose, the way most people do when they are too tired to think but not tired enough to sleep. That's when he saw her, an old university friend, smiling in a place that didn't look like the kind of place he could afford right now. A caption about a new role, a new city, a new chapter. The comments were full of congratulations, admiration, little digital applauses from people who once shared the same lectures, the same cheap takeaway meals, the same uncertain future. He stared at it longer than he meant to. It wasn't just that she had done well, it was the ease of it all, the sense that things had opened for her in a way they hadn't for him. Or maybe had, and he had simply missed the turn. He locked his phone and told himself to move on. But something had already shifted. The next morning, life looked the same commute, the same office lights, the same small tasks that filled the hours without ever feeling like progress. But now there was a quiet comparison running in the background of everything he did. When a colleague mentioned a promotion, he smiled, but it felt delayed. When someone spoke about holidays, it sounded distant, like a language he used to understand. Even his own achievements felt smaller, like they had been quietly resized overnight. He began checking more often. Not because he expected anything new, but because he wanted to confirm what he already felt, that there were people moving forward while he was standing still. And strangely, it didn't always look like success. Sometimes it was just better lighting, better photos, better angles on ordinary lives. But his mind didn't distinguish between presentation and reality. It simply absorbed it all as truth. At first, it made him restless. Then it made him selective. He stopped noticing what he had and started noticing what he didn't. A newer car, a bigger flat, a group of friends laughing in a way that looked effortless. Even silence in his own life began to feel like absence rather than peace. One evening, he met up with an old friend from school. They sat in a familiar pub, the kind that hadn't changed in years, and tried to catch up the way people do when they've drifted slightly too far apart. His friend talked about work, about plans, about things that were coming together. He nodded, asked questions, laughed at the right moments, but inside, something tightened. Because everything his friend described sounded like movement, and everything in his own life sounded like maintenance. On the walk home, he told himself he was being unfair, that everyone has their own pace, that social media is not real life. He even believed it for a while. But belief and feeling are not the same thing. The feeling stayed. It began to show in small decisions. He worked later, not because he needed to, but because stopping felt uncomfortable. He started saying no to invitations without much reason. He told himself he was just busy, but the truth was simpler. Being around other people made the comparison louder. At night, the scrolling returned. And now it had a rhythm. Check, compare, shrink, repeat. One evening, he came across another post from her, a celebration this time, a clearer promotion, a sharper image of success, a caption about gratitude and growth. He felt something he didn't want to name. It wasn't anger exactly. It was closer to disbelief that someone else's life could be unfolding so cleanly while his felt so scattered, as if life had quietly chosen sides without telling him. That night, sleep didn't come easily. His mind replayed small moments from the past few years, choices he had made, opportunities he had delayed, conversations where he had said, maybe later, too many times. Things that once felt harmless now looked suspiciously like turning points he had ignored. By the following week, something in him had changed shape. He began to see her life as a reference point, even when he didn't want to. A mental measure he couldn't switch off. If something good happened, it was briefly comforting, then immediately followed by comparison. If something bad happened, it felt like evidence that he was falling further behind. What he didn't notice was how much he was misreading everything. He saw highlights, not context, moments, not struggles, arrival, not journey. And slowly, without realizing it, he started to believe that everyone else had figured something out that he had not. The turning point didn't arrive loudly. It came in a quiet, ordinary way. He was at work when he overheard a conversation about her. She had left the company. Not because things were perfect, not because everything had gone smoothly, but because she had been overwhelmed, burnt out, quietly struggling in ways that never made it into any caption. He sat still when he heard it. Later that day, he did something he hadn't done in a long time. He looked properly, not just at her posts, but at older ones too. Different cities, different roles, different phases that all looked certain in hindsight, but were anything but at the time. And slowly, the image he had built began to crack. Not because her life was worse than he thought, but because it was human, messy, unstable in ways that had been carefully hidden behind moments of clarity. That evening, he didn't scroll as much. Instead, he sat with something uncomfortable. The realization that he had been comparing his full story to fragments of someone else's. The following days didn't transform him. There was no sudden peace, no dramatic shift. But something softened. He started noticing details he had been ignoring, the colleague who always made time to help others, the small project he had completed months ago that had actually made a difference, the quiet routines that kept his life steady even if they didn't look impressive from the outside. He even met his old friend again. This time, he listened differently, without the constant internal measuring, and he realized something strange. His friend wasn't ahead. He wasn't behind either. He was just living a different version of the same uncertainty, dressed in different outcomes. Later that night, he picked up his phone again. He hovered over the app for a moment. Then he closed it. Not because he had mastered anything, not because he no longer felt comparison, but because for the first time he understood what it was doing to him. It wasn't showing him life. It was only showing him pieces of it. And pieces were never the full story. Outside, the night carried on quietly, the way it always did, and for once, his own life didn't feel like it was missing something. It just felt like it was still unfolding. The next time you find yourself measuring your story against someone else's highlight, pause, ask yourself, am I comparing my unedited reality to their edited moment? Because if you are, you're already standing on unequal ground.